I stood there in the doorway, hands still dusted with flour, my apron clinging to my waist like some cheap costume I'd forgotten to take off. Natalie didn't even look up from her phone as she spoke. "It's just a hobby, Emma. You don't need to get so worked up," she said, her tone flat, like she was bored by the whole conversation. A hobby? I glanced over at the tiny folding table in the corner of the kitchen, where rows of hand-piped cookies rested on cooling racks. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. Each swirl of icing, every delicate detail, I'd spent hours imagining them into existence. The air smelled sweet, but my throat was tight. "You really think you're going to build a business out of this?" she added, finally lifting her gaze. She tilted her head and gave me that pitying little half-smile that always made me feel small. I swallowed the sting in my chest. "Yeah," I whispered, though my voice sounded too soft, too hopeful. "Maybe I do." Natalie sighed, tucking her phone into her purse. "God, Emma. Grow up. I think some people are born believing they deserve applause. Maybe it's something in the way their parents look at them, like every little effort is a miracle. That wasn't how I grew up. In our house in Madison, Wisconsin, the word practical was thrown around like it was holy. My dad, Paul, worked at the Postal Service for 35 years. My mom, Diane, was a nurse who could fall asleep in the middle of a sentence, her body so tired from double shifts she'd sometimes drift off right there at the dinner table. There was never extra, no extra time, no extra money, no extra praise. We were the sort of family who believed love was shown through casseroles left in the fridge, gas tanks secretly filled, rent payments slipped into mailboxes when you were 2 weeks behind. But no one clapped when you colored inside the lines. No one called you gifted or special. I learned to make myself small. The first time I ever baked something from scratch, I was 9. I'd saved my allowance for 3 weeks to buy a box of cake mix and a cheap icing kit from the dollar store. It was a Saturday morning. My parents were working, and my older brother, Jeremy, was supposed to be watching me, but he'd taken off on his bike with his friends. I still remember the sound of the hand mixer sputtering to life, the way the flour floated into the air like soft white dust. I remember how my heart thumped when the oven timer finally dinged. It wasn't perfect. The edges were burnt, and the middle sagged in a little crater. But when I bit into it, warm, sweet, a little bit like triumph, I felt something I couldn't explain, like the world was bigger than I'd been taught to believe. That afternoon, when Mom came home and found the mess I'd made, she pinched the bridge of her nose. "Emma," she said tiredly, "you're making more work for me. You know I don't have time to clean this." I apologized. I always apologized. But that night, after she'd gone to bed, I slipped back into the kitchen and took another piece of cake. I ate it in the dark, sitting cross-legged on the linoleum floor, and decided that someday, someone would love what I made. I never told anyone that part. All through middle school, I was the quiet kid who got good grades and never caused trouble. I watched other girls blossom, Natalie among them. She was beautiful in the way only girls who never question their worth can be. Blonde hair, big blue eyes, a laugh that turned boys' heads in the hallways. We met in 7th grade homeroom when she tapped her pen against my desk and asked if I had an extra piece of gum. I gave her the whole pack. She liked me because I was safe, someone who'd never outshine her, who'd always say yes. Over the years, Natalie became the sun around which everyone orbited. She never outright told me I was less. She didn't have to. Her approval felt like air. Her disappointment felt like a chokehold. When we were teenagers, she once watched me frost cupcakes for a fundraiser and laughed. "You get this serious look on your face," she teased, mimicking my concentration. "Like you're solving world hunger instead of decorating cupcakes." I laughed too because it was easier than admitting I felt embarrassed. In college, Natalie moved to Chicago to study marketing. I stayed in Madison for community college, working evenings at a bakery called Maple and Main. I told myself it was temporary, that eventually I'd transfer, get a business degree, do something practical. But the truth was I loved that job more than anything I'd ever done. The owner, Mrs. Jennings, was an old woman with a spine as straight as a ruler and a voice soft as meringue. She let me experiment when we were slow, new recipes, new designs. She'd watch me with this twinkle in her eye, like she saw something I hadn't quite learned to believe. "You have hands that know," she told me once, laying a flowery palm over mine. "Some people never find the thing that makes them feel alive. If this is yours, don't let anyone talk you out of it." I wanted to believe her, but every time Natalie came home on break, she'd ask if I was still baking. She said it the same way someone might ask if you were still playing with dolls. Still. Like it was something I was supposed to outgrow. I remember the last Thanksgiving before everything changed. Natalie was in town, and we all gathered at my parents' house. After dinner, she pulled me aside in the kitchen while the others watched football. "So, what's your plan, Em?" she asked, swirling her wine. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, feeling suddenly 14 again. "My plan?" "Yeah." She gestured to the cookie trays I'd spent 2 days preparing. "You're not really thinking you can make a living off this?" The way she said this, like it was something sticky and embarrassing. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've been thinking about starting my own shop someday." Her eyebrows lifted. "A shop?" "Yeah." My cheeks were hot. "I've been saving. I have a lot of ideas." "Emma," she said softly, putting a manicured hand on my arm. "You're so smart. You could do anything. Why waste your time on a hobby? You're almost 30. Don't you want something real?" Her words clung to me like smoke. I didn't argue. I never did. But when I drove home that night, my chest felt heavy in a way I couldn't shake. Like if I didn't do something soon, if I didn't bet on myself, I'd wake up in 10 years still waiting for permission to be happy. After that, I started keeping my plans to myself. I worked extra shifts at the bakery. I took online classes in food safety and small business accounting. I opened a secret savings account. Every time I felt doubt creeping in, every time I heard Natalie's voice in my head, I'd picture that 9-year-old girl on the kitchen floor, eating burnt cake in the dark. She deserved better. So I kept going. I kept believing that maybe, just maybe, the thing everyone dismissed as a hobby was the truest part of me. And someday, they'd all see it too. It was a Sunday in early March when everything came to a head. I remember because there was still a brittle crust of snow on the ground, and the cold wind kept sneaking under the door of my little apartment, numbing my ankles as I worked. I'd been up since dawn, frosting a batch of custom engagement cookies for a client who'd found me on Instagram. The order was bigger than any I'd done before, 200 individually wrapped sugar cookies, each with delicate watercolor flowers and gold lettering. I'd spent days preparing. That morning, as I arranged them into neat rows on the table, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Pride. Maybe it was silly. Maybe Natalie would still call it a hobby, but to me, this felt like proof. Proof that I could create something beautiful from nothing. Proof that people wanted what I had to offer. I'd just finished tying the last satin ribbon when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Natalie. "Natalie. Hey, are you around? Want to grab brunch? I'm in town." My stomach tightened. I almost didn't reply. But some part of me, some old, obedient version, still wanted her approval. I wiped the powdered sugar off my hands and texted back. "Me? Sure. I can meet you at the Clover around 11. When I walked into the restaurant, Natalie was already at a corner table, scrolling through her phone with one hand wrapped around a mimosa. She looked up as I approached, her lips curving into a practiced smile. "Hey, she said, rising to kiss my cheek. "Wow, you look tired." I sat down, tucking my hair behind my ear. "Yeah, I had a big order this weekend." "Still baking?" she asked, in the same tone you'd used to ask if someone still watched cartoons. I forced a smile. "I am. Actually, it's going really well. I'm almost booked out for the next month." "That's cute." She took a sip of her drink. "But don't you ever feel like you're wasting your degree?" I felt the old flush creeping up my neck. "No, not really. I feel like I'm finally doing something that matters to me." Natalie tilted her head. "Emma, you're almost 30. You know that, right? It's not a good look to still be playing around in your kitchen. You're too smart for this." I swallowed. My hands were damp where they rested in my lap. "It's not playing around. It's a business." She blinked, as if the word startled her. A business? Yes. My voice was steadier than I felt. I've registered the LLC. I have clients. It's real. Natalie set down her glass, folding her arms. Emma, come on. Do you honestly think you're going to make a living off cookies? Something in my chest caved in. She wasn't the first person to doubt me. But somehow, it always hurt more coming from her because a part of me still believed she was right. I tried to change the subject, but she wouldn't let it go. She leaned forward, lowering her voice as if she were doing me a favor by being blunt. I'm telling you this because I care, she said. You're wasting your potential. Everyone says it, you just don't listen. You could have a real career, but instead you're acting like a teenager with a hobby. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because in that moment, all I heard was the echo of every time she'd told me I wasn't enough. After brunch, I walked back to my car in the biting wind, the to-go cup of coffee she'd insisted on buying me already cold in my hand. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring through the windshield at nothing. I knew I should feel angry, but mostly I just felt empty. I went home, locked the door behind me, and turned my phone to silent. Hours later, when I finally picked it up again, there was another message waiting. Natalie, I'm sorry if I was harsh. I just don't want you to get hurt when this doesn't work out. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not because she'd said something new. She hadn't. But because for the first time, I realized she wasn't trying to protect me. She was trying to keep me small enough to fit the version of me she liked best. I stared at her message until my eyes blurred. And then, without thinking, I did something I'd never done before. I didn't reply. I set the phone face down on the table and turned away. All night, I worked in the kitchen. I rolled out dough and piped flowers and listened to the quiet, humming certainty in my chest. When the sun rose the next morning, I looked at the rows of finished cookies and felt something I hadn't dared to claim before. I didn't need Natalie's permission. I didn't need anyone's. After that brunch, something in me clicked into place, quietly, without fireworks. I didn't storm out of Natalie's life. I didn't post angry messages or tell her off in poetic text paragraphs. I simply stopped giving her access. It started with silence. I didn't reply to her follow-up texts. When she tagged me in a meme on Instagram, I left it unread. I stopped liking her stories. It wasn't malicious. I just wasn't interested anymore. I withdrew, not to punish, but to preserve. For years, I'd shaped myself to fit inside the version of me that others had constructed. The nice girl, the helper, the safe one who never challenged or competed. But now, every time I heard Natalie's voice in my head, dismissing my dream as just a hobby, it made my hands tremble, but not with fear, with resolve. I changed my number. I stopped calling my mom to tell her every little update. I knew how the conversation would go anyway. That's cute, Em, she'd say. But are you making enough to pay the bills? No congratulations. No curiosity. Just that thin line of Midwestern skepticism that always translated to, don't get your hopes up. So I stopped needing applause. I stopped performing for people who'd never clap. Instead, I poured everything into my business. I called it Sage and Sugar, a name that felt like a prayer and a promise. I designed the logo myself, built the website from scratch, and started offering pre-orders online. At first, only a few people noticed. A local teacher, a bride-to-be, an elderly woman named Ruth who emailed me to say that my shortbread reminded her of her mother's. But I didn't chase numbers. I chased depth. I began posting short videos of my decorating process, time-lapse of me carefully piping royal icing into delicate floral patterns, mixing edible paints, wrapping orders in parchment and lace. One video hit 1,000 views. Then 10,000. Then a celebrity chef reposted one of my reels with the caption, "Obsessed with this precision and aesthetic. Give her a show." Everything exploded after that. Orders doubled overnight, then tripled. I started waking up to hundreds of emails from people across the country. Some wanted cookies. Some just wanted to say they were inspired. One message simply said, "Your work made me cry." Thank you for showing that quiet women can still be powerful. That one made me cry, too. I never responded to Natalie's occasional texts. Not when she asked how I was doing. Not when she messaged, "Saw your video." So cute, 2 hearts.
Not even when she called me.
I watched her name light up my screen in the middle of the night once. I let it ring. Then I blocked the number. I wasn't being cruel. I was being clear. Every time I used to share a win with her, she'd find a way to deflate it. You know the market is saturated, right? My friend tried doing that too. She quit after a year. Don't forget to pay your taxes. It always ended in me second-guessing myself. And I was done with that chapter. I stopped asking people for advice who had never built anything themselves. I stopped giving discounts to people who rolled their eyes when I said the price. I stopped minimizing my joy just because it made someone else uncomfortable. I started choosing peace over approval. When the pressure of filling orders got overwhelming, I hired a part-time assistant, a local high school senior named Ava, who reminded me of myself. She was shy, but passionate. The first time she decorated a cookie, her hands shook so much the petals blurred. "It's okay," I said. "We don't chase perfection here. We chase care." That became a motto. By summer, I had outgrown my apartment kitchen. I leased a small commercial space in a historic building downtown, exposed brick, big windows, vintage tile. I painted the walls soft sage and hung handwritten notes from my earliest customers in gold frames. I still remember the first day I opened the doors. It wasn't a grand opening. There were no balloons or influencers. Just me, a few dozen cookie boxes, and a playlist I'd made years ago titled Someday. And yet, it felt like everything I'd ever dreamed. Customers came in and told me stories about birthdays, weddings, breakups,
Loss.
and how something I'd made had become part of their memories. One woman cried when I recreated a cookie design from her late grandmother's cookbook. Another brought her daughter and whispered, "She wants to be a baker." I wanted her to see someone who did it. Every night, I locked up and cried, not from exhaustion, but from the kind of joy that feels too big for your chest. I no longer checked Natalie's social media. I didn't wonder what she was doing, or if she'd seen the articles beginning to appear in local magazines. I didn't think about whether she understood what she'd missed. Because I wasn't building my life as a lesson for anyone. I was just finally living it. And the silence that used to feel like punishment now felt like the softest kind of power. I didn't yell. I didn't post quotes about cutting people off. I just rose. And in that rise, I found peace I didn't even know I'd been starving for. I didn't realize how visible I'd become until the day I got an email with a subject line: "Feature request, women who built it themselves." I almost deleted it. I'd been getting so many spam offers lately, people wanting me to buy expensive ad packages or license my recipes. But something about this one felt different. The sender was a journalist named Lila Whitaker. She worked for the American Artisan, an online magazine that highlighted independent creators and small businesses. I clicked it open, feeling my pulse in my throat. "Hi, Emma. I've been following your journey for over a year. Your work is extraordinary, but what inspires me even more is your story. I'd love to feature Sage and Sugar in our upcoming series on women who turn their passions into thriving businesses, often in the face of doubt or discouragement. Would you be open to a conversation?" I read it 3 times. Then I leaned back in my chair and laughed, because for a long time, I'd wondered if anyone outside my tiny circle could see me. Apparently, they could. I replied that same day. Lila called me 2 days later, her voice warm and steady. We talked for over an hour. She asked about everything: how I started, what it was like to work alone for so long, why I kept going. Somewhere in the middle of the conversation, she said, "You know, I first discovered your shop because my sister ordered cookies for my niece's birthday. She told me, 'This woman is the real deal. She does everything herself.' She even wrote me a handwritten note thanking me for the order." I swallowed, blinking fast. "Your note made her feel like she mattered," Lila continued. "You don't see that a lot these days." That was when I realized All the things Natalie used to mock me for being too earnest, too meticulous, too invested in something small were the same qualities that built this brand. I scheduled a photo shoot with Lila's team the next week. I almost canceled the morning of, some stubborn part of me still worried it was self-indulgent. But when the photographer, a young woman named Rachel, started snapping pictures of my kitchen and workbench, she kept saying, "This place feels like a living journal." I didn't know what she meant until later, when I saw the proofs. My hands arranging dried flowers on cookie boxes. My face soft with concentration as I painted delicate watercolor petals. My chalkboard wall covered in sticky notes of client names and little doodles. I looked happy. Not performing. Not striving for someone else's validation. Just at ease in the life I'd created. The article went live 2 weeks later. Sage and Sugar. How Emma Carlson turned a hobby into a thriving brand that inspires thousands. I read the headline again and again, the word hobby in quotes making my throat tighten with something I couldn't quite name. It felt like closure. Within days, my inbox flooded. Orders came from all over the country. Former customers emailed congratulations. A podcast host reached out to request an interview. A woman from Oregon messaged me on Instagram to say, "I screenshotted your story and sent it to my mom. She always told me my jewelry making was a waste of time. You made me believe it's possible." But the message that stunned me most didn't come directly to me. It came through Mrs. Jennings, my old boss at Maple and Main. One evening, she called me, something she hadn't done in almost a year. "Emma," she said, her voice brimming with emotion, "I had the loveliest conversation today." Oh. I sat down at the little cafe table in the back of my shop, bracing myself. "Your friend Natalie stopped by." My stomach dropped. "She what?" "She said she just wanted to see where you started." Mrs. Jennings continued gently.
She asked about you.
"About how you learned. About whether you were always so determined." I pressed a hand to my chest. "I told her the truth," Mrs. Jennings said. "I told her you were the most dedicated young woman I ever met. That nothing, not even the people closest to you, could keep you from believing in yourself." I didn't say anything. "And you should know," she added, her voice softening. She looked ashamed. Like maybe she finally understood. A long silence stretched between us. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't have to thank me, dear," she said. "You did this." All I did was watch. After we hung up, I sat there in the dark, the only light coming from the string of fairy bulbs over my counter. For years, I'd fantasized about this moment, the moment Natalie would see she'd been wrong. I thought it would feel like victory, but instead, it felt like something else. Like relief. Like I could finally stop trying to prove anything to her, or to anyone. I didn't need her validation anymore. I didn't need her to be proud. I was proud enough for both of us. That night, I pulled up the article again. I read the part where Lila described my work as an elegant rebellion. I smiled. If this was rebellion, it was the sweetest kind. I don't know exactly when the shift happened, but I can pinpoint the moment I felt it. It was a Wednesday morning, a week after the American Artisan article went viral. I was packing an order of wedding favors when my phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought it must be another influx of orders or maybe a podcast booking. But when I glanced at the screen, my heart sank. 5 missed calls from my mother. 2 from my dad. 3 from Natalie. I didn't answer. Instead, I set the phone on the workbench and finished tying the satin ribbons around the boxes. My hands were steady.
I was surprised by that.
The next day, I finally listened to the first voicemail. My mom's voice was high and brittle, the way it always got when she was trying to sound casual, but was actually anxious. "Emma, honey, I saw that article about your business. It's nice. It would have been thoughtful if you'd told us it was happening. Anyway, call me back when you can." I didn't call her back. The second voicemail was from Natalie. "Hey, she began, her voice carefully upbeat. "Wow. I had no idea you were doing so well. I mean, of course I knew you were working on it, but this is bigger than I realized. Maybe we could catch up? I'd love to hear how you scaled everything." I closed my eyes, inhaled, and then deleted the message. Over the next week, the tone of the outreach shifted. At first, it was thinly veiled curiosity, disguised as concern. Then it morphed into flattery. My mom texted me a photo of a neighbor holding one of my cookie boxes, with the caption, "Mrs. Callahan's granddaughter ordered from you. Small world." My dad emailed a link to an article about strategies for small business growth, with a note, "Proud of you, kiddo. Let me know if you want to brainstorm expansion ideas." Natalie sent a string of texts over several days. Natalie, thinking about your brand. So inspiring. Natalie, remember that marketing class I took? I have tons of contacts who'd love your stuff. Natalie, if you ever want help getting your story out there, just say the word. Seriously, I'm so happy for you. I read each message without emotion. They weren't reaching out because they regretted dismissing me. They were reaching out because I had become something worth associating with. For years, my value had been conditional. Conditional on how well I fit into their expectations, how little I asked for, how predictable I stayed. Now that I'd stepped outside that script, they didn't know how to relate to me. So they tried to reset the narrative. I didn't let them. One evening, Natalie called again. This time, I answered. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I knew I was strong enough not to be swayed. "Emma," she exclaimed, breathless like she'd just run a mile. "Finally, oh my God, you're basically famous now." I held the phone to my ear, silent. "I mean, wow. I've been telling everyone I know about you. Remember when we used to sit in your kitchen and eat your test batches? I knew you had something special." My jaw tightened. "You told me it was just a hobby," I said, my voice low. She paused. I imagined her sitting on her pristine white couch, trying to find a way to spin her old words into something benign. "I was just trying to look out for you," she said finally. "You know that, right? I didn't want you to get hurt if it didn't work out." I almost laughed. If I'd listened to her, none of this would exist. No storefront. No orders from across the country. No emails from women saying I inspire them to try. "I'm not hurt," I said simply. She exhaled. "Okay, good. So, do you want to meet for lunch? I have some ideas for collaborations. Maybe branded content or a pop-up event in Chicago. You have no idea how many people I know who'd love this aesthetic." I looked around my shop, the soft sage walls, the warm glow of the pendant lights, the display case filled with the work of my own hands. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. She hadn't called to congratulate me. She'd called to make sure she wasn't left behind. "I appreciate you reaching out," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But I'm not looking for partnerships right now." "Oh," she said, startled. "Well, maybe later? You should at least think about it. I mean, exposure is everything." I'd heard that word so many times, exposure, usually from people who thought I should work for free. "No, thank you," I said. A long silence. "Emma," she said finally, "I just don't want things to be weird between us." "They're not," I said. "They're just different now." She didn't know what to say to that. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to fill the silence. When we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I didn't need her to understand. I didn't need her to approve. All I needed was the quiet certainty that I had built something real, with or without her blessing. And in that certainty, I found a peace deeper than any apology could have offered. A month after the American Artisan article went live, I was sitting in the back of the shop, sipping chamomile tea and catching up on emails, when I saw it. A message from an address I didn't recognize. Subject: "You changed my daughter's life." I opened it cautiously, expecting either a wholesale inquiry or another request for free samples. Instead, I found a story. "Hi, Emma. You don't know me, but my name is Grace Whitaker. I'm Lila's sister. My daughter, Hannah, turned 14 this year. It's been a rough time. She's smart and creative, but she's never felt like she fits in. She loves baking more than anything. She spends hours experimenting in our tiny kitchen, making cupcakes and scones and little jars of jam. When she read your article, she cried. I mean, really cried. She said, Mom, she did it. She made something real. You made her feel like her dreams weren't ridiculous. That being quiet and careful and devoted wasn't weakness. It was her strength. I just wanted you to know you have a fan for life. Thank you for giving her hope. I pressed my hand to my mouth and blinked back tears. There it was. The thing I'd been reaching for all along. Not attention, not approval, but connection, proof that my work mattered to someone. I replied immediately. Grace, thank you for sharing this. It means more than I can say. Tell Hannah that she's already braver than most adults I know. The world needs people who care enough to create something from nothing. If she ever wants to visit Sage and Sugar, I'd love to show her around. Warmly,
Emma.
An hour later, Grace wrote back. You just made her whole week. We'll be driving through Wisconsin next month. I'll be in touch. I closed my laptop and sat in the quiet shop, the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint smell of vanilla filling the air. For the first time, I let myself feel it fully. I'd done something good. I'd built something from the scraps of every doubt, every dismissal, every time someone called my dream just a hobby. The next morning, I found a small envelope slipped through the mail slot. There was no return address. Inside was a folded piece of thick stationery and a check. Emma, congratulations. I was wrong.
N.
The check was for $5,000. A note in the corner read, for your next expansion. I set it on the counter and looked at it for a long time. Then I slid it back into the envelope, sealed it, and tucked it into a drawer. I didn't want Natalie's money. Her validation had come too late, and I'd realized something important. I didn't need it anymore. 2 weeks later, Grace and Hannah came to visit. I almost didn't recognize them when they walked in. Hannah was so small, her shoulders hunched, her hair pulled into a tight braid like she was trying to disappear. I greeted them with a smile and ushered them behind the counter. You want to see how it all works? I asked gently. Hannah nodded, her eyes wide. I gave them the tour. I showed them my storage shelves, the big industrial mixer I bought with my first big commission, the little chalkboard I used to track custom orders. When I asked if she wanted to try piping a cookie, Hannah looked up in surprise. Really? Really? I set out a tray and filled a piping bag with soft pink icing. She hesitated for a moment before she took it, her hands shaking the way mine once had. Her first line wobbled. Her second one was smoother. That's beautiful, I said. She looked up at me, her face so open it almost hurt to see. No one's ever said that before, she whispered. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Well, I said softly, they should have. When they left an hour later, Hannah hugged me so tightly I nearly lost my balance. Grace pressed a hand over mine. You have no idea how much this meant to her, she said. I smiled. I think I do, I said. That evening, after I closed the shop, I stood alone in the dark. For so long, I'd thought success would look like recognition. A big payday. A headline proving all the doubters wrong. But standing there, the only thing I felt was gratitude. Gratitude for every time I'd chosen to keep going. Gratitude for the small, steady voice that told me I didn't have to be louder, just truer. Gratitude for the girl I'd been, sitting on the kitchen floor at 9 years old, tasting her first batch of burnt cake. I whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." I wasn't sure who I was thanking. Maybe God. Maybe every version of myself who'd refused to quit. All I knew was that I'd made something real. And that was enough. The first snowfall of the season came early that year. I was in the shop alone, a tray of gingerbread cooling on the counter, when I heard the soft scrape of a car pulling up outside. Through the frosted glass, I saw a figure in a long wool coat standing by the door. My heart didn't jump the way it once would have. When the bell chimed and Natalie stepped inside, the cold rushed in with her. She looked different, her hair shorter, her eyes lined with something I couldn't quite read. Guilt? Or just discomfort? "Hi, Em," she said, her voice small. I wiped my hands on a towel and met her gaze calmly. "Hi." She looked around the shop, taking in the tidy rows of gift boxes and the soft golden lights. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "Thank you." A silence stretched between us. The old Emma would have rushed to fill it, to smooth things over, to reassure her. But I didn't feel the urge anymore. Natalie cleared her throat. I'm sorry for just showing up. I tried calling. I know, I said. Her eyes flickered. I guess I just wanted to see it for myself. I've been thinking about everything I said. How dismissive I was. And how small I made you feel. I didn't respond. I wanted her to say it all without interruption. She took a breath, her voice wavering. I told myself I was protecting you, that I was being realistic. But the truth is I was scared. Scared you'd succeed without me. Scared you'd leave me behind. My chest tightened, but not in the way it used to. I realized, standing there in the warm vanilla-scented air, that I could hear her without absorbing her guilt. I know I can't take it back, she whispered. I know you don't owe me anything. But I miss you. Her eyes were shiny with tears she didn't want to shed. I was hoping, she continued, that maybe we could start over. Even just as friends.
For a long moment, I didn't speak.
I thought about the girl I'd been. How she would have clung to this moment, desperate for any scrap of approval. How she would have convinced herself that this was closure.
But now?
Now I knew better. I looked her in the eye, my voice quiet but steady. I appreciate you coming here, I said. And I hear what you're saying. But I don't think I have room for this in my life anymore. Natalie blinked, as if she hadn't expected me to be so calm. I'm not angry, I continued. I'm not holding a grudge. I've moved on. And I don't think going backward would be good for either of us. Her lip trembled. I get it, she said softly. I really do. Another silence. This one softer. I wish you all the best, I told her. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Me too, she whispered. You deserve everything you've built. I walked her to the door. Outside, snowflakes drifted onto her hair, melting on her lashes. For a second, I almost reached out to hug her. But then I realized I didn't need to. Some connections can end without cruelty. Some doors can close quietly. She took a step backward, her breath curling in the cold air. I'm proud of you, Em, she said. I smiled. Thank you, I replied. And that was it. She turned and walked to her car, her footsteps crunching over fresh snow. I stood there a moment longer, watching until her taillights disappeared into the blue dusk. When I went back inside, the shop felt unchanged.
Warm.
Peaceful.
Mine.
I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window, the snow falling heavier now, blanketing the street in quiet. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to call anyone and recount what had just happened. I didn't need validation. I didn't need reassurance that I'd done the right thing. I knew it in my bones. Saying no wasn't anger. It wasn't punishment. It was simply the most honest thing I could offer. And in that simple, final refusal, I felt something profound. Closure. No bitterness. No triumph. Just the soft certainty that I had outgrown the version of myself that needed to be understood by people who never really tried to understand me. I took a sip of my tea and closed my eyes, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. Peace, I thought. This is peace. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the moment Natalie called it a hobby. How easily those words rolled off her tongue. How small I felt, sitting across from her in that cafe, my dreams folded neatly between my palms like a paper crane she'd just crushed without noticing. But here's the thing no one tells you. Most of the people who belittle your ambitions aren't trying to destroy you. They just can't imagine a life braver than the one they've chosen. And it's easier to call someone else's vision silly or impractical than to face your own fear of wanting more.
I didn't know that back then.
I thought her words were truth. I thought my desire to create something beautiful was embarrassing. I thought my devotion to tiny details was a weakness. It took years. Years of quiet labor, of whispered self-encouragement, of showing up in my kitchen when no one was watching, to understand that what I had wasn't smallness. It was conviction. And conviction is never small. If you're listening to this, if you're reading these words in the dark on your phone, wondering if your dream is foolish, if you should give up before you embarrass yourself, I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me. You are not too much. You're just too vivid for people content with gray. If your heart is pulled towards something, baking, painting, writing, teaching, planting, know that there is a reason for it. A truth only you can bring into the world. And that truth doesn't need anyone else's permission to exist. It doesn't need to be monetized or endorsed or applauded. It only needs you to honor it. There will always be voices like Natalie's, soft with condescension, wrapped in the language of practicality. Be realistic. It's just a phase. You'll grow out of it. But the truth is, they're talking about themselves. About their own unclaimed dreams. Don't let their fear become your inheritance. Don't shrink so they feel more comfortable. I built Sage and Sugar from the tiniest thread of belief. A belief I held when no one else did. I built it from late nights and early mornings, from bruised egos and burnt batches, from the refusal to stop just because someone couldn't see what I saw. And when I look around the shop now, the soft green walls, the handwritten thank you notes, the humming refrigerator stocked with dough, I see proof. Proof that something beautiful can grow in the spaces where you once felt invisible. Proof that a hobby can be the foundation of a life. Proof that you don't have to explain your vision to people committed to misunderstanding it. If you take nothing else from my story, take this. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You don't have to be understood to be real. Sometimes, the most revolutionary thing you can do is quietly keep going. Keep baking the cookies. Keep writing the poems. Keep planting the seeds. Keep painting the canvases. Keep showing up, even when no one claps, even when everyone calls it silly, even when you feel like the smallest light in a room that doesn't care if you go out. Because one day, your work will speak for itself. One day, the people who doubted you will see what you've built and understand, maybe for the first time, that their disbelief wasn't a prophecy. It was a mirror. A mirror reflecting all the ways they'd abandoned their own hopes. And by then, you won't need their recognition. You'll be too busy living the life you imagined, the one you chose when you decided your passion was enough. You'll be too full of purpose to care whether they approve. You'll be too free. So if you're standing at the threshold of your own dream right now, uncertain and scared, let this be your sign. You don't have to wait. You don't have to ask. You don't have to apologize.
Start.
Start small. Start imperfect. Start in secret if you must. But start. Because sometimes the things we dismiss as hobbies are really the map back to ourselves. And you deserve to come home.